Black CEO goes undercover as a janitor. What he discovers about his employees leaves him speechless. Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the polished glass walls of a successful corporation? What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of a thriving business? Today, we bring you an extraordinary story of humility, transformation, and truth. Meet Ethan Maxwell, a brilliant CEO at the helm of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America. From the outside, his world seemed perfect: record-breaking profits, groundbreaking innovations, and a legacy of success. But when employee complaints began to surface, Ethan made a bold decision that would change everything. In an unprecedented move, this powerful CEO left behind his corner office, disguised himself as a janitor, and went undercover to uncover the truth about his own company. What he found shook him to his core, and inspired a change that no one saw coming. If stories of courage, leadership, and redemption inspire you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us as we dive into this incredible journey of discovery and transformation. Because sometimes, the most profound lessons come from the unlikeliest places. Ethan Maxwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his sleek Los Angeles office, watching the city pulse with life below. The faint glow of red tail lights snaked through the streets like veins in a body. The city alive with purpose. It was a view Ethan had worked tirelessly to earn, a symbol of his relentless drive and success as CEO of Horizon Tech, one of the nation's most innovative companies. But tonight, the view offered him no comfort. At 42, Ethan should have felt fulfilled. The company had just closed another record-breaking quarter, their flagship AI product transforming industries across the globe. Yet, there was an ache, a sense that something critical was slipping through his fingers. It wasn't about profits or competition. It was about people, his people. Mr. Maxwell, came the familiar voice of his assistant, Sarah, over the intercom. Your 10 o'clock meeting is waiting. Ethan exhaled sharply, brushing a hand over his short hair. Send them in, please. The doors opened, and in walked Monica Gray, the polished and ever-composed head of human resources, alongside Greg Simmons, the energetic chief operating officer. Their expressions mirrored the tension Ethan had been feeling, an unspoken weight that hung over them. Thanks for coming, Ethan said, motioning toward the conference table. He stayed standing, unable to sit still. Let's get straight to it. Employee satisfaction survey results. I assume you've both seen them. Monica nodded, setting her tablet down. I have. And they're not good. Greg jumped in, his tone brisk. Look, Ethan, these numbers aren't surprising. We've grown fast, probably too fast. Some grumbling is to be expected. Right? Ethan's gaze locked onto Greg, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. Grumbling? Greg, these aren't just complaints about long hours. People are using words like toxic and favoritism. That's more than growing pains. Monica cleared her throat, her professionalism a thin veil over her discomfort. To be fair, Ethan, rapid expansion does strain culture. But there's a pattern in the feedback. Employees feel disconnected from leadership, from the mission. Some even said they're afraid to speak up. Afraid. The word hit Ethan like a cold slap. His throat tightened. Hadn't he built this company to be different? A place where innovation thrived on openness and collaboration. What do you think we should do? Ethan asked, his voice quieter now, laced with vulnerability. Monica hesitated, glancing at Greg. We could start with team-building initiatives. Maybe re-evaluate our benefits package. No, Ethan interrupted, shaking his head. This goes deeper. Benefits won't fix what's broken. He turned, pacing to the windows again. His reflection stared back. A man who once knew every employee by name but now felt like a stranger in his own company. "My father used to say," Ethan began, his voice tinged with emotion, "you don't truly know a company until you've walked in the shoes of its lowest paid employee." He paused, turning back to face them. "That's what I need to do." Monica frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Ethan's lips curved into a determined smile. "I'm going undercover, as a janitor." The silence that followed was deafening. Greg leaned back, arms crossed, a skeptical smirk forming. "You're serious?" "As serious as I've ever been," Ethan said, his resolve firm. "We contract our janitorial services through an agency. I'll join as a new hire. I want to see what it's really like to work here, not through surveys, but through their eyes." "Ethan," Monica began, her tone almost pleading, "this is risky. If people find out, it could backfire. And do you honestly think you'll go unnoticed? You're the face of Horizon Tech. That's why I'll need a disguise." Ethan replied, his voice calm but resolute. "Glasses, a beard, maybe even a new haircut. It doesn't have to be perfect. People don't look twice at janitors." "That's the whole point." Greg sighed, leaning forward. "All right, let's say you pull this off. What do you expect to find? What if it's worse than you think?" Ethan hesitated for a brief moment before answering, his tone heavy with determination. "Then I fix it, whatever it takes." The next week was a whirlwind of preparation. A makeup artist transformed Ethan into a scruffy, unassuming man with thick-rimmed glasses and a shaggy beard. He practiced walking with a slight stoop, his typically confident stride replaced with a shuffling gait. The night before his first shift, Ethan stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection. His tailored suits and polished shoes were replaced by a worn uniform and scuffed boots. The transformation was unsettling but necessary. "Ethan," Rachel's voice came from the doorway. She leaned against the frame, her arms crossed. "This is insane." "You know." "I know," Ethan replied, adjusting his glasses. "But it's the only way." Rachel sighed, stepping closer. "Promise me you won't get so caught up in this experiment that you forget why you're doing it." Ethan smiled softly, pulling her into an embrace. "I won't. I promise." As dawn broke, Ethan parked his car far from his usual reserved spot. The sight of Horizon Tech's towering glass facade brought a surge of nerves he hadn't felt in years. "This is it," he murmured, pulling his backpack onto his shoulder. He stepped through the employee entrance, the familiar buzz of the building's operations surrounding him. For the first time in years, Ethan Maxwell wasn't the CEO. He was Evan Parker, janitor, and no one even looked twice. The air in the basement level of Horizon Tech was thick with the scent of cleaning chemicals and faint mildew. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a stark, almost clinical glow on the rows of cleaning carts and supply shelves. Ethan, or rather, Evan, stood near the doorway, trying to blend in as other janitorial staff filtered in to start their shifts. "Parker, right?" Ethan turned to see a stocky man with a sun-weathered face and a permanent scowl. The man extended a clipboard toward him without waiting for a response. "Name's Don. I run the floor crew here," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Here's your schedule. Stick to it. Stay out of people's way. And don't screw up. Got it?" Ethan nodded, taking the clipboard. "Got it," he said, keeping his voice low and steady to match his assumed persona. Don squinted at him for a moment, then shrugged. "Good. Start with the main lobby. Someone spilled coffee by the elevators again. You'll find the mop bucket in the closet down the hall. Move it." Ethan pushed the cleaning cart toward the elevator, feeling the weight of its wheels against the tiled floor. As he entered the lobby, he marveled at how different it felt from this vantage point. Employees streamed in, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. Most of them walked past him without a second glance. The first hour of the shift was simple. Cleaning the spill near the elevators was mechanical. But Ethan's mind was already racing. This was the heart of the company he had built. Yet it felt distant, detached. "Excuse me." Ethan looked up to see a young woman in a tailored blazer gesturing toward a smudge on the glass door. "Could you get that?" she asked curtly, her tone neutral, her eyes already flicking back to her phone. "Of course," Ethan replied, reaching for the spray bottle. She didn't wait for him to finish before hurrying off toward the elevators. Heels clicking sharply, he turned back to his work, only to overhear a conversation between two employees near the reception desk. "Did you hear about the new promotion in marketing?" one of them said, her tone low but excited. "Yeah, James got it," the other replied. "Can't say I'm surprised. Everyone knows you have to be in with upper management to get anywhere around here." The first woman chuckled bitterly. "Makes you wonder why they even bother posting job openings." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had heard rumors of favoritism before, but hearing it casually discussed like common knowledge hit differently. He thought back to the surveys. The phrases like toxic culture that had seemed so abstract. Now they felt tangible. By midday, Ethan had made his way to the cafeteria, tasked with cleaning tables and emptying trash bins. The smell of coffee and reheated food mingled in the air. As he moved between the tables, he kept his ears open, straining to pick up snippets of conversation. At one table, a group of employees leaned in, their voices hushed but tense. "They're pushing this deadline so hard it's impossible," a man said, running a hand through his hair. "I haven't seen my kids in 3 days." Another employee nodded grimly. "Same. And if we miss it, guess who's taking the fall? Not management." Ethan clenched his teeth, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He wanted to say something, to reassure them that their concerns would be heard. But Evan Parker, janitor, couldn't offer those kinds of promises. Across the room, Ethan noticed a lone figure sitting at the corner table. She was middle-aged, with deep lines etched across her forehead. Her name tag read Marsha, and her cafeteria uniform looked a size too big for her slight frame. As Ethan moved closer to clean the table next to hers, he caught her muttering softly under her breath. "They don't see us," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the food tray in front of her. Ethan paused, unsure if she was speaking to him or herself. "Pardon?" he asked quietly. Marsha looked up, startled. She blinked a few times before shaking her head. "Nothing. Just talking to myself." Ethan hesitated. Something about her tone, the resignation, the weariness, stirred something in him. "Do you mean the staff?" he asked gently. Marsha let out a soft laugh, humorless and hollow. "Not just staff. Everyone. To them. We're invisible. We clean up after them. Make sure everything runs smoothly. And they walk right past like we're part of the furniture." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Marsha wasn't just talking about herself. She was describing an entire layer of the workforce, his workforce, that had been overlooked and underappreciated. "I'm sure someone notices," Ethan offered, though the words felt weak. Marsha gave him a long, searching look before picking up her tray. "If they do, they sure don't show it," she said, walking away. The day wore on, each task offering Ethan new glimpses into the lives of his employees. In the engineering wing, He cleaned around a group of developers who were engaged in animated discussions about a new feature. At first, the energy in the room seemed invigorating, but Ethan quickly noticed the dynamics. One young woman, her name tag read Riley, kept trying to speak up, only to be interrupted or ignored. When she finally blurted out her idea, the room fell silent. "That's actually a solid approach," one of the senior developers said after a pause. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" "I tried," Riley muttered, her voice barely audible. Ethan felt a pang of frustration for her. The pattern was clear. Voices that didn't fit the dominant mold were being drowned out. As the day wound down, Ethan found himself back in the janitorial office, his body aching in ways he hadn't anticipated. Don appeared in the doorway, giving him a once-over. "You survived," Don grunted, a faint smirk on his face. "Barely," Ethan replied, allowing himself a wry smile. Don leaned against the doorframe, his expression softening. "You'll get used to it. Or you won't. Most don't stick around long enough to find out." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. He wasn't here to stay, but he already felt a deep respect for the people who did. As he clocked out and stepped into the cool evening air, Ethan felt the weight of the day settle over him. He had learned so much, yet it felt like only the tip of the iceberg. The disconnect between Horizon Tech's values and its reality was undeniable. For the first time in years, Ethan Maxwell didn't feel like a leader. He felt like an outsider, a witness to the cracks in the foundation of the company he had built. Tomorrow, he vowed, he would dig deeper. Ethan arrived at Horizon Tech the next morning feeling the wear of the previous day, both physically and emotionally. The unfamiliar weight of the janitor's uniform hung on his shoulders. But heavier still was the realization that his company, the company he had poured his life into, wasn't the beacon of excellence he had believed it to be. The basement janitorial office buzzed with the usual chatter as Ethan clocked in. Don greeted him with a grunt, handing him a new clipboard. "You're on the executive floor today, Parker," he said with a smirk. "Guess they want the new guy to get a taste of the high life." Ethan nodded, suppressing a bitter smile. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he pushed his cart into the elevator, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The executive floor had always been his domain, a place of polished surfaces and quiet authority. Today, he would see it through different eyes. The floor was as pristine as he remembered. But from this angle, the veneer felt thin. Ethan began his work, wiping down conference tables and emptying trash cans. He moved quietly, blending into the background, just another cog in the machine. As he worked, he overheard snippets of conversations that made his stomach churn. "We need someone with the right image for the client pitch," came a voice from a nearby office. Ethan glanced through the open door to see Linda Harper, the VP of Operations, speaking to another executive. "What about Diane? She's been here for years and knows the product inside out," the other replied. Linda scoffed. "Diane, please. She's too quiet, too plain. We need someone with charisma. Someone who can impress." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Diane's name was familiar, a hard-working manager whose dedication had been mentioned in countless reports. He had always assumed employees like her were valued, but Linda's words told a different story. Ethan moved on, his mind racing. As he dusted the bookshelf in another corner office, he overheard a heated conversation from the adjacent conference room. "I'm telling you, this project is a disaster waiting to happen," said a frustrated voice Ethan recognized as Kevin, one of the senior engineers. "The timeline is unrealistic, and we're cutting corners just to hit the deadline." A second voice, sharp and dismissive, replied, Do you want to explain that to the board? They want results. Kevin, not excuses. Get it done. The conversation ended abruptly, and Ethan heard the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as people filed out. He stepped back into the hallway just as Kevin emerged, his face tight with frustration. Their eyes met briefly, but Kevin looked away, shoulders slumped as he walked off. By midday, Ethan found himself in the employee break room, refilling the coffee machines and wiping down tables. The room was quieter than usual, with only a handful of employees scattered at the tables. One of them, a woman in her early 30s, sat hunched over her laptop, her face etched with exhaustion. "Long day?" Ethan asked softly, breaking character slightly. The woman looked up, startled, then managed a tired smile. "You could say that. Deadlines don't care about weekends." "Apparently." Ethan nodded, glancing at her name badge. Taylor. Marketing. He recognized her name from recent project reports. She was part of the team responsible for Horizon's latest product launch. "Sounds rough," he said. "Do you get much help?" Taylor laughed, the sound bitter. "Help? Not really. It's just me and a couple of interns trying to pull off a campaign that would normally take a team of 10. She paused, her expression softening. "Sorry, I'm venting. It's not like anyone actually listens around here." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. "Maybe they should," he said quietly. Taylor gave him a curious look but didn't press further. As she returned to her laptop, Ethan made a mental note to look into her situation when this was all over. The afternoon brought Ethan back to the engineering floor, where he spotted Henry, the kind-hearted IT worker he had met the day before. Henry was once again helping a co-worker troubleshoot a technical issue, his patience and expertise evident in every word. Ethan lingered nearby, pretending to clean as he listened. "And that should fix the glitch," Henry said, stepping back as his colleague tested the system. "You're a lifesaver, Henry," the co-worker said, smiling. Henry waved it off. "Just doing my job." But as Henry turned away, Ethan caught the faintest flicker of weariness in his eyes. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the kind of fatigue that came from giving your all without feeling truly valued. As the day wound down, Ethan found himself back on the executive floor, cleaning a corner office that had always symbolized success to him. From this vantage point, though, the polished wood desk and sleek glass windows felt hollow. He thought about the people he had encountered over the past 2 days, Marsh's quiet resignation, Taylor's frustration, Henry's unwavering kindness. They were the lifeblood of Horizon Tech, yet their struggles and contributions often went unnoticed. For the first time, Ethan felt the full weight of his responsibility as a leader. He had always believed in leading by example, but now he realized how distant he had become from the very people who made his vision possible. As he packed up for the day and stepped into the cool evening air, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the cracks in Horizon Tech ran deep, and it was up to him to mend them. But first, he had to see just how far they went. By the 4th day of his undercover mission, Ethan Maxwell, now firmly Evan Parker, Janitor, felt the exhaustion seep into his bones. Cleaning the endless rows of desks and glass walls was physically taxing. But the emotional weight of what he'd discovered was far heavier. Horizon Tech wasn't just struggling with a cultural drift, it was fractured. And the cracks ran deeper than he had imagined. Today, his assignment took him to the customer service department, a sprawling maze of cubicles bathed in the cold glow of computer monitors. This was the ground floor of Horizon Tech's operations, the front line where employees handled client concerns and complaints. Ethan knew little about this department beyond numbers in quarterly reports. but he was about to gain an education he hadn't asked for. The tension in the air was palpable the moment Ethan stepped onto the floor. Phones rang incessantly, voices overlapped, and the hum of frustration buzzed like static electricity. Ethan began wiping down the desks, his ears tuned to the conversations around him. "Mrs. Jenkins, I completely understand your frustration," one young man said, his voice strained but polite. "I'll escalate this issue to my manager right away." The moment he hung up, the polite veneer fell away. He slumped in his chair, rubbing his temples. "That's the third escalation today," he muttered to a colleague. "If they'd let us handle these issues directly instead of running everything through 3 layers of approval, maybe we could actually fix something." Another co-worker nodded grimly. "Good luck getting management to listen. They only care about metrics. Resolve calls faster, they say. Like it's that simple." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He'd signed off on those metrics himself, believing they were an effective way to measure efficiency. But now, seeing the toll it took on these employees, he realized how disconnected those decisions had been. As Ethan moved to another section of the floor, he noticed a woman seated at a cluttered desk, her head in her hands. Her nameplate read, Janine. Ethan approached cautiously, emptying the trash can beside her desk. "Rough day?" he asked softly, breaking his character's usual silence. Janine glanced up, her eyes red from either exhaustion or tears. Ethan couldn't tell which. "You could say that," she replied with a weak smile. "But around here, what day isn't rough?" She gestured to her desk, where a sticky note with the words 60 calls per day was prominently displayed. "That's my target, 60 calls, no exceptions. Doesn't matter if half of them are angry customers who want a miracle. I just have to keep moving, keep smiling." Ethan frowned. "That sounds impossible. Do they at least recognize how hard you're working?" Janine let out a bitter laugh. "Recognize? The only time they notice is when we fall short. I missed my target last month because I had to take 2 sick days. My supervisor told me I need to prioritize better." Her words settled over Ethan like a lead blanket. He wanted to apologize, to tell her this wasn't how things should be. But Evan Parker, janitor, wasn't in a position to make promises. Later that afternoon, Ethan's cleaning duties brought him to the company mailroom, where he met Sam, a wiry older man with a kind smile and a meticulous way of sorting packages. "You're new, right?" Sam asked, handing Ethan a stack of deliveries. "Yeah," Ethan replied, "just trying to keep up." Sam chuckled. "Don't let this place get to you. They'll chew you up if you let them." Ethan hesitated. "What do you mean?" Sam's smile faded, replaced by a somber expression. "I've been here 18 years. Seen it all. Used to be a great place to work. People cared, looked out for each other. But these days, it's all about numbers, efficiency, productivity, profits. People like us, we're invisible, just part of the machine." The words struck Ethan harder than he expected. Sam wasn't bitter, he was resigned. And that, Ethan realized, was worse. As the evening approached, Ethan found himself back in the cafeteria, wiping down tables as employees filtered out for the day. In a quiet corner, he spotted Taylor, the overworked marketing specialist he'd met earlier in the week. She was hunched over her laptop again, a cold cup of coffee by her side. "Burning the midnight oil?" Ethan asked, leaning on his mop. Taylor glanced up, startled, but then recognized him. "Seems like it's all I ever do," she replied with a tired smile. "Shouldn't you be heading home?" Ethan asked gently. Taylor shrugged. "What's the point? If I leave now, The work will just be waiting for me tomorrow. Besides, management expects us to go above and beyond. Right? Her voice dripped with sarcasm, but underneath was a note of despair that Ethan couldn't ignore. Has anyone ever thanked you for all this effort? He asked. Knowing the answer but dreading it anyway. Taylor shook her head. Not really. The only feedback we get is when something goes wrong. Ethan wanted to scream. This wasn't the company he had envisioned. The culture he had worked so hard to create. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the people who made Horizon Tech what it was. As Ethan clocked out and walked to his car, he felt the weight of his discoveries pressing down on him. He had seen enough to understand the scale of the problem, but the hardest part was knowing he had played a role in creating it. Horizon Tech wasn't broken because of a few bad managers or isolated incidents. It was a systemic failure, rooted in years of prioritizing numbers over people. And now, it was up to him to fix it. Standing in the parking lot, Ethan looked up at the towering building silhouetted against the night sky. It no longer felt like a monument to his success. It felt like a challenge, a call to action. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing: the people of Horizon Tech deserved better. Ethan Maxwell arrived at Horizon Tech on the 5th day of his undercover mission with a renewed sense of determination. The week had been grueling, both physically and emotionally. He had witnessed kindness in the quiet moments, cruelty in the dismissive comments, and indifference in the strained silences. Today, he would see his mission through to its conclusion, knowing it was only the beginning of what had to come next. The day started in the engineering department, where Ethan quietly cleaned around a group of developers huddled at a table. Their whiteboard was covered in scrawled equations and diagrams, and their voices carried the charged energy of collaboration. "Riley, what do you think?" one of the senior developers asked, looking at a younger woman seated at the edge of the group. Riley hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. I think we should consider optimizing the back end for scalability first," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's actually a good point." Another developer chimed in. "It could save us time down the line." The senior developer nodded. "Good catch, Riley. Let's add that to the plan." Ethan watched Riley's face brighten at the rare acknowledgement. But the moment was fleeting. As the conversation moved on, she fell silent again, overshadowed by louder voices. Ethan wanted to step in, to remind everyone that ideas like Riley's were what drove innovation. But he couldn't, not yet. Later that morning, Ethan was assigned to clean the executive lounge, a space he had frequented countless times in his role as CEO. The leather chairs, marble countertops, and expensive coffee machines were as familiar to him as his own home. But today, the room felt alien, as he polished the glass table in the center of the lounge. Ethan overheard a conversation between two executives standing by the coffee machine. "Have you heard the rumors about the board?" one of them said, his voice low but urgent. "What about them?" the other asked. "They're getting restless. The last quarter's numbers were great, but the employee turnover is catching up with us. If this keeps up, they might start looking for someone to blame." Ethan froze, his hand stilling on the glass. The implications were clear. The culture of fear and pressure wasn't just affecting employees on the ground, it was permeating the highest levels of the company. By midday, Ethan found himself back in the cafeteria, where the atmosphere was unusually tense. A group of employees stood clustered near the vending machines, their voices hushed but intense. "They're cutting the budget for department socials again," one woman said, frustration etched on her face. "Apparently, it's not a priority." "That's ridiculous," Another replied, "We already barely see each other outside of work. No wonder morale's in the gutter." Ethan listened silently, their words reinforcing what he had already seen. The company's focus on efficiency and metrics had drained it of the human connection that had once been its foundation. In the afternoon, Ethan was sent to the mailroom, where he found Sam sorting packages with his usual precision. "Back again, Parker," Sam said with a grin. "What did you do to deserve another shift down here?" Ethan chuckled, feeling a pang of affection for the older man. Must have made a good impression. Sam's grin faded, replaced by a thoughtful look. "You're a hard worker, Parker. You remind me of how this place used to be. People cared back then. Now, it's all just noise." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He didn't have the words to respond, not as Evan Parker. As the day wound down, Ethan found himself cleaning the lobby for the final time. The polished floors and gleaming glass walls reflected the setting sun, casting warm hues across the space. Employees trickled out of the building, their faces weary but focused. Ethan paused by the elevator, leaning on his mop as he watched them go. He thought about the faces he had met over the week, Marsha's resignation, Taylor's exhaustion, Riley's timid brilliance, Sam's quiet dignity. They were the soul of Horizon Tech, yet their voices had been drowned out by the relentless march of metrics and deadlines. When the last employee left, Ethan straightened, gripping the mop handle tightly. Tomorrow, he would return to this building not as Evan Parker, janitor, but as Ethan Maxwell, CEO. But he wouldn't return to the same company, because he wouldn't let it stay the same. The next morning, Ethan called a company-wide meeting in the largest auditorium on the campus. The room filled quickly, employees whispering and speculating about the sudden announcement. When the lights dimmed, Ethan stepped onto the stage, his polished suit and commanding presence a stark contrast to the scruffy disguise he had worn all week. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've called this meeting because I need to share something important with all of you. Over the past week, I've had the privilege, and I mean privilege, of seeing this company from a perspective I never had before." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, confused murmurs rippling through the room. "Many of you probably saw me," Ethan continued. "You just didn't recognize me. I've spent the past week working as a janitor here at Horizon Tech." Gasps echoed across the room as Ethan held up a photo of himself in the janitor's uniform. Recognition dawned on faces across the audience. "I did this because I needed to understand what it's really like to work here, not from surveys or reports, but from the ground level. And what I saw has humbled me, inspired me, and frankly, broken my heart." Ethan paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I saw incredible people like Henry in IT, who goes above and beyond to help his colleagues. People like Riley in engineering, whose ideas deserve to be heard. People like Taylor in marketing, who sacrifices her personal time to keep our campaigns running. And people like Sam in the mailroom, who has been the backbone of this company for nearly 2 decades." The crowd was silent now, every eye fixed on Ethan. "But I also saw things that shouldn't happen here, or anywhere. I saw hard work go unrecognized. I saw fear, frustration, and a sense of invisibility that no employee should ever feel." Ethan took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "That changes today. We are not just a company, we are a community. And starting now, we will rebuild this community together. We will create a culture where every voice matters, where hard work is valued, and where no one feels invisible." The room erupted in applause, the sound swelling like a wave. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the true weight of leadership, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. Horizon Tech's future wouldn't be easy, but it would be brighter. Together, they would create something worth believing in. And so, Ethan Maxwell's journey came full circle, not as a leader commanding from above, but as a servant of the people who make a company thrive. By walking in their shoes, he rediscovered the heart of his organization and ignited a transformation that will leave a lasting impact. This story is a powerful reminder that true leadership isn't about titles or power, it's about humility, listening, and making meaningful change. It challenges us all to look closer, to value the voices around us, and to strive for workplaces where respect and collaboration are more than just ideals. What would you have done in Ethan's position? Would you have the courage to see the truth and make a difference? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting the subscribe button. It's completely free, and it ensures you'll never miss another inspiring story like this one. Together, let's celebrate stories of change, compassion, and courage. Until next time, stay inspired and take care.